And we are in a series on the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah chapter 6 we're going to be on today. So if you have your devices or your Bibles, just turn them over to Nehemiah chapter 6. We're going to be studying that passage this morning. But before we get started, let me just tell you about this table. When Julie and I first moved into our house in 2007, she wanted me to make her some furniture. I don't know where she got the idea, really, that I could do that, but it just sounded like a nice idea. And me, the dummy that I am, I said, you know what? Sure, why not? Let's do it. And so this table actually has a twin table, and I made it in 2007. And it was just easy to go to Home Depot, and you go and you start looking at all the wood pieces they have for furniture and the legs and this and that. And I knew, by the way, I know nothing about woodworking, okay? And so I'm just going and saying, okay, let's see at Home Depot what there is. And I found this piece of wood that was flat already, almost cut to size. I just had to, shave it on one side. And then the legs are already, they're made already the way they were. And so I was like, how hard can it be to get it, put together? How hard can it be? Let me tell you, very hard. Number one. Number two, if you don't know the materials, that's a big deal. I didn't know until I put it together. The type of wood that you use, the technique that you use to put it together, it all makes a difference. And so what I didn't realize, for example, in this table is that not a lot of people use pine for tables because it's so soft that if you were to look at this table closely, we have 3 kids, and so you see all those 3 kids right here. Okay, any of you guys ever fallen, even I could do this with my fingernail and probably leave a small dent because it's so soft. And so you need the right material to do certain things. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We need to be made of the right material. So I want you to ask yourself this question. If you were to say, hey, what kind of material am I? Would you say, pine, I'm just softy. I'm a soft piece of wood. Or I am, steel. I just, I'm hard and, and the reality is that there's no right or wrong question, except that we need to ask ourselves, what kind of stuff can I endure? And what kind of stuff am I susceptible to? What is the stuff that affects me? And what's the stuff in life that actually doesn't bother me? See, each type of material as you build furniture is made for a little bit different use. So like I said, pine is usually not used for tops unless you're going to be careful. But maybe oak is harder wood that can withstand, more. And you can use white oak or red oak, and it varies at different qualities. White oak you can even use for outside, is weather resistant. And so you just know what you need to use. And when we talk about restoring, we've been talking in Nehemiah about restoration. We need to decide, what kind of material we are and what are the stuff that's going to affect us. Like I say, there's no right or wrong. You can put something that's made of steel or metal outside, but it's going to rust at some point. Maybe wood won't do that, but there are other things that affect it. And so what we're going to be talking about is how do we endure hardship? Sometimes when we think of hardship, we usually think of sickness or financial, instability or any other type of issues. But many times, it seems like people that try to follow the Lord and have to endure hardship. And if you are here sincerely, and if you're seeking God, and if you're trying to find out what He wants to do with your life, let me just tell you that He's going to need some tough people. Christianity is definitely not something that anyone can embrace. In reality, throughout history, you see that it's going to require, if you want to follow Christ as your Lord and Savior in a personal way, in a real way, not just come to church and sit down and do that, but if you really want to follow Christ, you are going to have to develop some stamina, some endurance, the ability to endure the test of time and the test of trials. And that's exactly what's happening. In fact, I just got an email from our executive minister, Todd Winslow, a former co-worker of his from the church that he came from, Real Life Ministries, that's now starting a church in Texas. He's just faced right now with a lot, of issues in his church and his personal life. His daughters, in fact, just got into a car accident this week, and one of them, they had to reattach her ear, and she's going to be fine. But the other one, has two serious injuries and is in an induced coma. So please help pray for them. They're at a church plant in Texas. But, it seems like the longer that I'm in ministry, if you've been a Christian for a long time, the more and more you hear that, sometimes Christian workers, faithful Christians that, are serving the Lord, have to endure hardship. And you know what? This has the ability sometimes to mess with your Christian life and your spiritual relationship with the Lord. And so we're going to be talking about how Nehemiah faced some of the toughest hardship ever in his ministry and in his life. So here's what's going on. If you just walked in here and this is the first time you hear, what's going on with Nehemiah. Here's what Nehemiah is about. Nehemiah is one of the last, as far as the setting, it's not one of the last books in the Old Testament, but the setting is set about 500 years before Christ came. And Nehemiah was in Persia. He was a Jewish, but he was in Persia working for the king, and he realizes that his hometown, the family that he knew, they were in Jerusalem. Jerusalem had been destroyed about 70, 90 years prior to Nehemiah finding this out. And he's trying to go back and just provide safety. He saw that the walls were down in the city. The city was still, it hadn't been restored, hadn't been rebuilt. So he goes back with the idea, hey, let's do something. Let's not let this town, if our fathers died, let's not let this town where God at one point worked, so much, die. Let's rebuild it. And so they are in the process of rebuilding this town, the city, Jerusalem. But in the process, he faces different types of hardship. We saw, in chapter 4, 3 and 4, that, he was facing just some hardship as far as people, being jealous and seeing, what they were doing and trying to stop the work of rebuilding that wall. And then we saw that sometimes, hardship comes from within. Last week, and we're going to talk today about something different. We're going to talk about experiencing hardship in the most personal level. Through personal attacks. See, it is said about war that it is one thing to go fight a war in someone else's territory. It is something completely different to have to fight it at home. And the scars that it leaves, the way in which it marks your life is completely different. And I think the same applies to our personal lives. It is one thing to say, hey, I'm going to endure, we're going to have to endure hardship as Christians. And you might say, hey, what does that look like? Maybe it looks in the form of, in general, the church feeling attacked. And you say, well, that's not good. Maybe you see it in the form of our society rejecting our cultures and our culture and our values. And, that hits even more home. But what about, being really hitting home when it comes to personal attacks, when it comes to enduring hardship, when it comes down to your personal life and your family? And that's what we're going to be talking about. So, but here's the reason why I feel like we need to talk about it. And I have this C.S. Lewis quote that I found, and I wanted to share with you. It says that hardships often prepare ordinary people for an extraordinary destiny. C.S. Lewis said this about hardship, and I do believe that God restores lives through people that endured hardship. God is in the business of rebuilding lives. He's in the business of restoring families, of restoring lives. And I don't know where you are right now, but I want you to know that God wants to restore our lives to what He intended to be. He wants to give us purpose. He wants to give us meaning. But if we want to get there, He's going to need people that are able to endure hardship. He doesn't need a soft table that's made of pine that gets broken and gets, it's maybe not put together the way it needs to be, but he needs people that will be able to endure hardship. And here's what happened to Nehemiah. Let's open Nehemiah in chapter 6. And by this point, the walls are rebuilt. They just have to put the gates in. But here's what you're gonna see. Chapter 6, verse 1 of Nehemiah. When the word came to Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem the Arab, and the rest of our enemies that I have rebuilt the wall, and not a gap was left in it, though up to that time I had not set the doors and the gates, Sanballat and Geshem sent me this message. Come, let us meet together in one of the villages on the plain of Ono. But they were scheming to harm me, so I sent messengers to them with this reply. I am carrying on a great project and cannot go down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and go down to you? 4 times they sent the message, and each time I gave them the same answer. Sometimes hardship comes in different forms. And at times hardship, we see hardship in the form of deceit and pressure. We see hardship in the form of deceit and pressure. So here's one thing that is happening. Well, you just read Sanballat and Geshem and Tobiah. These were leaders from the region. So like any other country in the world now, you realize that the world is bigger than your country, than your city, whatever. And Nehemiah is the governor at this point of the city. But he realizes that there are leaders around that are watching what they're doing. And these leaders are jealous, basically. They get financial benefits from having Jerusalem not being a strong city. They are able to provide protection from the inhabitants of the city. And so Nehemiah rebuilding the walls meant, hey, something's going to change. We're going to lose money. We're going to lose influence. We're going to lose power. And so what they say is they call Nehemiah and they say, hey, let's talk, buddy. Let's come and meet and just get to know each other a little bit better. Now, Nehemiah is in the middle of this and he says like, hey, I don't know why they want to meet. And if you realize there in verse 3, he replies and he says like, why do you want to meet? It's like, why do I need to stop what I'm doing to go meet with you? And he gets no reply except the same invitation. And so what they're doing really is they are trying to deceive Nehemiah to get him to leave what he's doing, get him distracted, and then to discredit him a little bit. But they're also trying to put pressure on him. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but whenever you are in leadership, people are watching you. Any kind of leadership, it can be at work, it can be with your family, it can be in your community. If you're the kind of person that just likes to be active and get involved, the moment that you step in some type of way, to lead anyone, the eyes are on you. And all of a sudden what you do and what you say and what you stand for, it matters. And in your community, that's going to be the case. And that's exactly what's happened to Nehemiah. And you know what? Unspokenly, sometimes that brings pressure. And that's what happened to Nehemiah. What they were trying to do is they were trying to pressure him. They were trying to invite him and say, see, we're trying to be nice. We're just your neighbors over here. What are you doing? It's like, come meet with us. Let's come and let's meet. But Nehemiah knew because they didn't give him a reason to meet, there was no point really in this meeting. He said they were trying to maybe harm him. And so he said, I will not go. Sometimes the response we need to do is we need to identify those lies in our lives. What's the pressure that you have? We need to ignore the lies and be able to trust in God. Trust that God is in control. Trust that God is in control and stay on task. Don't let pressure distract you as you are facing different people trying to sway you one way or another. Don't let that pressure distract you. See, I grew up in Mexico City, and there were, on my dad's side of the family, they just were agnostics. And agnostic is someone that maybe doesn't know if there's a God, and they just don't care. And when I told them I was going to go into ministry, and I was going to just drop out of medical school and go into ministry, they really had a hard time understanding that. And they came and talked to me, my uncle and my aunt, a couple of aunts, and they just said, like, why would you do that? You know, you're leaving a good opportunity to do something with your life and to affect other people's lives. And it's like, why would you try to go into ministry? You know, you don't even know if that God is real. I mean, there is some pressure over there. And the closer that you are to people, the more that you're going to feel that pressure. And so I don't know how many of you, you know, if you have families who, or family members who do not believe in God, maybe just can you raise your hand real fast? You know, okay, so you have family members. You know, a lot of us do. And the reality is that when you tell them about your relationship with God, you're going to experience a little bit of pressure as well. Because what it does is exactly what was happening here. When someone sees Nehemiah in this case, when these leaders from around saw Nehemiah rise up and they saw God working in him, you know, it evokes feelings in their personal lives. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to put pressure. They don't want it necessarily, and they don't know what's going on, but they want to put pressure on him. And that's exactly what we'll feel. At times you're going to feel like people are asking you a lot of questions and just kind of questioning what you're doing with God. And they're going to ask you, why do you feel like you have to go to church? They're going to ask you, why do you feel like you have to give? Why do you feel like you have to give your time? Whatever it is that God is asking you to do at the time, you will be questioned and pressure will be on you. But you just need to identify if it's, you know, if it's a true, if they're truly concerned, if they're just, you know, trying to sway you to do something else, if they're trying to get you to change your mind, and just have to stay on task. Sometimes hardship, though, comes in a different form. In the form of slander and gossip. And you're going to see that this is going to get more and more personal with Nehemiah. So let's read verses 5 through 9. So Nehemiah tells them, hey, I'm not going to stop the work here. I'm not going to go. So then, and they ask him 4 times. He says the same thing over and over. And then, verse 5 says, then the 5th time, Sanballat sent his aide to me with the same message, and in his hand was an unsealed letter in which was written, it is reported among the nations, and Geshem says it's true, that you and the Jews are plotting to revolt, and therefore you're rebuilding the wall. Moreover, according to these reports, you are about to become their king, and have even appointed prophets to make this proclamation about you in Jerusalem. There is a king in Judah. Now this report will get back to the king, so come, let us comfort together. So they take the next step. They say like, hey, listen, you don't want to meet? Well, we heard somewhere. There are rumors. And now this is, you know, I thought it was interesting that Nehemiah mentions here, there was an unsealed letter. Here's what that, you know, why he alludes to that. Usually, if I wanted to send a message as leader of a region to another leader of a region, I would seal the letter. And why? Why is that? That means no one else can read it without my permission. That person is the only one that can open it. And there were different types of punishments if, you know, that letter got to that person with an open seal. Now, an unsealed letter meant basically it was public news. It was like you put it on Facebook, share with everyone, and you click publish. Okay, you just post it. And so now anyone and everyone could read it. In fact, it is assumed that an unsealed letter was posted on the city, you know, at certain spots for people to just see it. It was like a publication, you know, of news. And so what Nehemiah gets, by the time he gets this letter from Sanballat's aide, from his right hand man, is he finds out through the grapevine that all of the city already knows this message. What did the message say? See, this type of temptation hit Nehemiah's motives. So Sanballat was saying, you know what? All you want is power. And you just want to become king. And you want to revolt against the king. And Nehemiah's character gets attacked in a very personal way. See, what Sanballat is saying is that Nehemiah is setting all this up. The only reason why he came, he didn't care about the city. He didn't care about the people. All he cared about was to become king. That's exactly what he's trying to say. And so Nehemiah, you know, receives this letter that has been probably posted already in the city. And so can you imagine feeling that kind of weight? It's like, have you ever been, you know, on the I guess, some delusion end of someone, just slandering, committing slander against you, or gossiping, against you. And just you realize by someone else that someone said something about you, that someone is just, questioning your character, that someone is telling people things that aren't true. And I tell you what, that can be really frustrating. But verse 8, we see Nehemiah's response. And he says, I sent him this reply. Nothing like what you're saying is happening. You're just making it up out of your head. They were all trying to frighten us, thinking their hands will get too weak for the work and it will not be completed. But I prayed, now strengthen my hands. Strengthen my hands. One of the things that Nehemiah did is, number one, he exposed the truth. And he said, listen, all those things that you said about me, you don't know my motives, number one, but they're not true. You're just making it up. Number two, then he overcomes frustration and discouragement. I feel like whenever people suffer, from others gossiping about them, something that happened in their lives, just talking about them, maybe trying to discredit their character and just discredit their lives. We always feel, I don't know about you, but you always feel like you have to speak, to tell everybody, hey, this isn't true. Hey, you try to go out of your way and say, hey, whatever people are saying, it's not true. And I always go back to the example of Jesus. He's standing in front of Pilate. And Pilate is just telling them, hey, they're saying that you're doing this and that, and you're proclaiming to be what you're not. He's just, accusing them in all kinds of ways. And Jesus is just quiet. It's like, when you know the truth about your life, you know who you are, you don't have to defend yourself so much. He's just quiet. So you need to overcome frustration and discouragement by trusting that God, again, is in control. And they pray for strength. If you have ever endured hardship, I don't know about you, but here's my tendency. My tendency is to pray. But here's what I pray for. I pray, God, would you just get me out of here? Like, get me out of this. And I like Nehemiah's prayer. He didn't ask God to take it all away. He just asked God for strength. Strengthen my hands. And I want to ask you, what kind of prayer do you pray when you endure hardship? When things aren't going well, do you just want God to remove you from the situation, or do you ask for strength? And Nehemiah is asking for strength in this, and he definitely knows that God is in control ultimately. And so let's see what happens. Sometimes hardship comes in the form of discredit and intimidation. Sometimes hardship comes in the form of discredit and intimidation. See, this attack tested Nehemiah's integrity. Here's what happens. Verse 10. Let's keep reading. One day I went to the house of Shemaiah, son of Delaiah, the son of Mehetabel, who was shut at his home. He said, let us meet in the house of God inside the temple, and let us close the temple doors, because men are coming to kill you. By night they are coming to kill you. But I said, should a man like me run away, or should one like me go into the temple to save his life? I will not go. I realized that God had not sent him, but that he had prophesied against me, because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. He had been hired to intimidate me so that I would commit a sin by doing this, and then they would give me a bad name to discredit me. So here's what's happening. This is the last attack that we see up until this point. They hire a priest and they say, hey, Nehemiah, let's go into the temple and hide, because they're going to kill you. We don't want you to get killed. You are our leader, and so let's go and hide into the temple. Here's the problem. From the very beginning, God has established this law. Numbers 18:22 says that, only priests could go into the temple. This was called the holy place, and only the priests could go and minister there. In fact, we see examples of different kings trying to disobey this, and God didn't like it. And so the priest tells Nehemiah, hey, listen, you are in danger. Come into the temple. Let's hide. And what they're using is they're trying to intimidate. Fear is a powerful thing in our lives. I mean, it just kind of changes. Fear is irrational many times. We don't understand it. It doesn't make sense, but it drives us. And so here's what I want you to do. I want you to just listen. And this is, I wanted to show you how, fear can be so irrational, but it still has an effect in you. So I want you to listen to this. Steve, if you can play that. It's amazing how, if you have ever watched a scary movie, all you need to do is a little bit of suspense, a little bit of strings like you're hearing, odd noises. If we were to, bring the lights down, keep that louder, it's like all of a sudden you're like, you may be in the safety of your home. That's good. We don't want anyone running out of here. That's good. Well, you can be in the safety of your home, okay? And if you ever watch a scary movie, you're like, okay, so everything is locked. All of a sudden you're like, is everything locked? You go, you check. You turn a light on. For some reason, darkness, right? It's not good.